Good morning. Welcome to episode 90 of the Driller Newscast, a weekly update on the news and stories impacting the drilling and water industry. I'm your host, Brock Yordy, and yes, this is our last episode of 2023, and it is brought to you by the great people at TDH Manufacturing. This week in the news, we're going to talk about the Geothermal Technologies Office, the Department of Energy, and the report they just released on ground source heat pumps. Next, we're going to talk about how that's relating to COP28. As we film right now, they're in an extra day of negotiations on what COP 2028 turns out to be. Our feature this week will be a year-end wrap-up of what our workforce is going to look like in 2024, water, PFAS, groundwater in the courts, and of course, the great opportunities we have in geothermal. But before we get to all this great content, I want to jump back to the show floor of Groundwater Week 2023 and a great discussion we had with Scott at TDH about this big bad pump hoist that it looks like something Santa would have put under a Christmas tree. I hope you enjoy. Hi, this is Brock Yordy at National Groundwater Week, day number 2 of the convention. We're live, and we have our friends at TDH who have done a wonderful job this year supporting the newscast and the editorial content that we have coming out, knowing the importance of keeping people informed. And we got the big boss here, Scott Moser with TDH. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and then what is this? This is like Santa brought me this.
Yeah, no, Scott Moser with TDH Manufacturing, and Chris Willis, we've sold him truck before in the past, and he come up with this idea that he wanted to put these super singles on this beast of a truck, and had all these custom ideas in mind and boxes and the whole setup. And so we spent a lot of time engineering and drawing it up and everything, and got it just the way he liked. And
so you're telling me if we call up and go, this is my dream pump hoist,
yeah,
you say we can do it?
we'll build it. Anything you want.
That's not typical for our industry.
No, it's not. No, and that was probably my biggest, I used to be in the water well business for a long time, and it was hard to get that. You'd have ideas, but nobody wanted to put them to use and stuff, and so we have a lot of people come that we do custom work for, and we've never had anything quite like this. This is everybody's dream, and probably the highlight of the show, because I don't even know if I'd want to put it to work because it's so beautiful. But
so can you go over to some of the features that make this innovative?
Number one, it's got our hybrid system on it, so you can run the truck all electric all day, shut it off, and everything works off electric power. And it'll run for several days without even charging it, so you don't have to run the diesel engine. Obviously, he did the big tires and that conversion, and it's got bigger outriggers, and it's got our electric over hydraulic system, and it's got the automatic sputter system built on both winches, so it'll scrub a well. There's really not.
So this is not only a pump hoist, but this is a well development rehab piece.
Yeah.
What a great value add to have, so you can get that rig onto the next job. And
he covers a lot of area and stuff, and so they want a lot of storage and everything. So obviously, like up here, we built a conduit box so he can put conduit in there, and he's got a lot of ideas. We kind of got the truck late, so we literally assembled this unit in 8 days to make it to this show. So
that's not typical lead times.
No, that's not typical lead time. So, but we do a lot of, we're building a lot of trucks, and we do a lot of custom stuff, and we do a lot of just standard, so it's really whatever the customer wants. And so, but this is definitely a show.
It was a fun project.
It was. Me and Chris had a lot of texts back and forth to get this thing accomplished with what he wanted.
Well, we appreciate you at the Driller and supporting the newscast and
Yeah,
being part of our advertising campaign. And it is always fun when I jump on your guys' website and whatnot and see what's going on because
yeah,
you're always pushing the innovation envelope. So we appreciate that.
yeah. We're always probably the biggest. I would say our biggest innovative deal that we've ever came out with was the electric. Because number one, these diesel engines, they do really good going up and down the road, but they don't like to idle. And so now when you put that on these rigs, and you can put it on any rig, competitors, anything. And so we made it pretty universal and stuff. And so it's been a big deal. Our big hoists have gotten super popular. We're building one of these a month now. So we're having a good time with it. We got a heck of a crew, and so we appreciate you guys and everything you do
have
for
a
us.
great Merry Christmas and
Yeah,
New
you
Year,
too.
and
Yeah.
we look forward to seeing what cool stuff you bring
See
out
what
in
happens
2024.
in 24, huh?
Yeah, you got Briner, one of my favorite people in the
Yeah.
world from my days of Jeffco. So
Yeah, got a great sales team and got a great team there. We got over 80 employees now, so
wow,
it's a full-time business.
cool. Well, thanks again.
Awesome, we appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott. For this week in the news, let's jump to the Department of Energy and the Geothermal Technologies Office and the report that was released early December. The report was grid cost and total emission reductions through mass deployment of geothermal heat pumps for building, heating, and cooling electrification in the United States. This analysis came from Oak Ridge National Laboratory and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which assesses the potential impacts of national scale mass deployment of geothermal heat pumps. It was a huge study. We talked about it at IGSPA. If you're not at IGSPA, you need to be. If you're not at the National Groundwater Convention, you need to be. There's so much going on right now that we need to be involved in. The study concluded that coupled with building envelope improvements, retrofitting around 70% of US buildings with ground source heat pumps could reduce electricity demand by as much as 13% by 2050 versus decarbonizing without ground source heat pumps. I want you to think about this. We have $1 trillion electric system that is just like all the rest of our infrastructure right now. It is old, and it's going to take several $1 trillion to get it up to date, not to mention what we need to do to reduce greenhouse gases. So this is a big deal using ground source heat pumps. The reduction in demand would avoid as much as 24,500 miles of new grid transmission lines by 2050. That's enough to cross the continental United States 8 times. These are the big things that are happening in the Geothermal Technologies Office and the funding that's going out. However, our industry, we have a little bit of an identity crisis, and we can see this with reports that come out when we talk heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, we talk geothermal, low temp geothermal. What are we talking about? Right now, we're talking about ground source heat pumps and loops and utilizing the earth as a battery, that constant temperature. And I want you to go to the Geothermal Technologies Office and jump on their ground source heat pump page, because it has an excellent section in there that states, is a geothermal heat pump the same as an air source heat pump? This has been a big debate. We've seen a lot of the funding go out, just say heat pumps, and that's air source versus ground source geothermal. And the answer is no. Geothermal heat pumps are different from air source heat pumps. Geothermal heat pump systems exchange heat from the earth, while air source heat pumps exchange heat from the air. I want you to take that section and send it to everybody in every community, anybody that's considering ground source heat pump versus just traditional heat pumps. It goes on to say, compared to air source systems, geothermal systems have been shown to be quieter, last longer, and require less maintenance, and they do not depend on the temperature of the outside air. That's right, they require less maintenance. Those loops can last 50 plus years. This is a big deal for us. To continue, geothermal systems are typically more expensive than air source systems, but the additional costs are often returned with energy savings. Yes, we discuss this often. I just saw another news article that came out that said boreholes are up to $20,000. This is the piece here. Sure, we can get a disposable system out there, and it can be out in the elements, and it can be noise pollution and heat pollution, and it was cheaper to put in. But I have a 5 and a 7-year-old. And as we jump into COP28, obviously I want us to think about, how does this work? Courtney, Lola, and I talked about it, and it's all about right here at our heart. What is going to be our future? And the investment is invaluable. To continue this discussion from GTO, why are geothermal heat pumps and hot rock geothermal so important? Because it's how we're going to decarbonize while keeping our real estate, that peace of mind, our farmland. This is very important for us to reduce the amount of electricity we need, to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases, and to become more sustainable. So, ground source heat pumps, you ought to be talking about them. You ought to be sharing them. Water well drillers, if you're thinking about this right now and going, man, this would be great for my house and my shop. No, it's great for your community, your state, the country, the world, humanity. Speaking of that, let's jump into COP28. By the time this episode airs, COP28 should have concluded. However, maybe not. The draft released on Monday, December 11th, published by the United Arab Emirates presidency of the summit, proposed various options but did not refer to a phase out of fossil fuels. Go back and watch the newscast on climate change. Look at extreme weather. Look at how this is all impacting us. And now we're having a discussion, you can just reduce what you want. Instead, it listed 8 options that countries could use to cut emissions, including reducing both consumption and production of fossil fuels, just in an orderly and equitable manner, so as to achieve net zero by or before or around 2050. Here's the deal. If we achieve it by 2050, we're too late. There are 200 countries involved, and 100 of these are for the phase out, while 100 are left on the fence, with the OPEC nations leading with various alternative options. China, our largest greenhouse gas producer, is undecided. COP28 had 3 major goals going into this session. First, an orderly phase out of all fossil fuels in a just and equitable way, in line with our 1.5 degrees C trajectory, while ensuring the tripling of global renewable energy capacity by 2030. Look at New York, look at Massachusetts, look at Colorado, look at Illinois, and see what's happening. If we look right now at the governors in the United States who have committed versus the ones that have not, it's almost split, 25, 25, 26, 24, depending. We have to cut greenhouse gases by 2030. So, as we look at that first response, this is from the 2022 levels and of doubling energy efficiency. There are plenty of climate studies out there right now that show the greenhouse gas reduction that we've done in the past 5 years has only just kept us on this trajectory. We haven't went extreme yet, but we're still heading towards 1.5 degrees Celsius. And as we've seen in the newscast episodes we've had, as you look at all the climate news out there, and there's a ton of it, it's science, it's data. Yes, we're tipping right past that 1.5 degree onto 2. We can see how quickly the polar ice caps, we can see what's happening with Greenland. There's so many pieces to consider here. So as we reach beyond 1.5 degrees C, we go to the second initiative going into COP28. And that is enabling environment to scale up and shift public and private finance, with developing countries taking the lead in action and support. putting a price on carbon and tripling investments. We have plenty of coastal developing countries that are being severely impacted by this extreme weather and climate change. And we, as a civilization, have to take in consideration what is the cost of continuing to use fossil fuels. So far, we've seen at COP28 that the oil-producing nations have come up with $30 billion in loans for developing countries. Loans. So we're going to profit off this now. It's unacceptable. The third is a major overhaul and reversal of deforestation and land degradation, as well as biodiversity and other ecosystems lost by 2030, which ensures resilient food systems and delivers a strong global goal of adaptation. We can see we're heading right towards a quarter of our global population being in food shortages and water shortages. We see the fights right here in the States. We see the water well foundations and wish and gifts that we have for those on private water wells that are outside public utilities. This is a big deal globally. This is a defining moment for COP28. We have to slow our use of fossil fuels and really consider what's happening to how life will be on our planet now and moving forward. We can see the Bureau of Labor Statistics already talking about extreme weather impacting farm workers and construction workers and those working outdoors where we can't control Mother Nature. We still have time, is what some climate scientists are saying, that we can stick to this 1.5 degree trajectory. The same, there are plenty of scientists saying that it's too late and that we're beyond that. And now we have to make a new goal of 2 degrees Celsius. And that is really scary as we look at the extreme tornadoes that just ripped through Kentucky and Tennessee, as we look at the atmospheric rivers, as we look at the drought, as we look at polar vortexes, the hurricanes. This is a big deal impacting us globally, economically, and personally. Keep paying attention to what comes of COP28 and understanding how we do our part. For our feature this week, let's recap everything that we have discussed and considered in 2023. Obviously, we don't have several hours to wrap up the newscast. You're busy, and next Monday, it's going to be Christmas. There's plenty of holiday celebrations going on, and then we have the new year. So I want us to start by thinking about recruitment and 2024 employment. And we've discussed this a lot as an industry and where we're going next. We see Department of Energy funding for training of drillers and renewable energy professionals. We see USDA funding for water professionals, groundwater professionals, drillers, wastewater operators, water plant operators. We're going to see Center of Excellences start popping up. And I have a couple pieces for us to think about. The first one is, who's training the trainers? And we have lots of ways of doing things, but what are your standard operating procedures for when you get those young professionals on site that have just come from a center of excellence? What is your safety policy? Next, what does your diversity and inclusion look like? Why we don't have the workforce we have today? Because when the housing market impacted us so hard, 2008, 2010 into 2013, when we had people like Mike Rowe doing dirty jobs and we glorified the blue collar workers, 50% were laid off and displaced, and they did not return. So the young individuals you have coming to work for you today, there's a good chance mom and dad were working in the construction industry when they got laid off and started this housing crisis, losing their house, multiple impacts. Of course, they went to community college. Of course, they went to college. Of course, trade schools slowed down. As I've said before, 7.9 million people work in construction. It's 161 plus million people that work every day. There's 9 million open jobs right now as we film the newscast. So there's plenty of options. We just talked about COP28 and climate change and extreme weather. Low pay, $22 an hour for the average wage for somebody working outdoors in construction versus that distribution center that's climate controlled, $30 an hour. If the living wage is 60 plus hours a week, 40 of those being regular, 20 being overtime, climate change is really going to slow down how we can be productive. These are things we need to think about. Next, water well drillers. We're a great hidden secret at 23 million private water wells. We just saw another November 2023 study come out and saying about 15% of our population depends on a private water well. Same studies as those came out said that private water wells are not safe because they're not regulated like municipal systems. I can say from working in municipal water, aging infrastructure, if I can have a groundwater professional that's licensed, smart, installs that with all NS60 and NSF 61 approved materials to their state standards, that is a safe system that, yes, should be checked regularly. I would go to groundwater.org. There's plenty of resources out there. Water Systems Council has a handbook for private water well owners. We can be responsible. It's no different than the food that's in our refrigerator, us looking at the sell by date and tossing out what's not safe to feed our family. We just need to treat our water systems the same way and understand now that we have Gen X chemicals and PFAS. 2023 was a big year for PFAS. What did we see? Almost $12 billion in lawsuit settlements. We're seeing countries like the Netherlands and the UK and France stepping up and outlawing these products. We've seen the EPA come out with multiple different rulings and how classifications, and we're working towards this. Obviously, municipal water is very scared of what is going to be the final results because small municipal systems are going to have a really tough time taking out PFAS, and obviously large systems, we're looking at price increases. These are big things that we need to be thinking about. And that we saw with Tucker Green in Georgia, and North Carolina and South Carolina are working towards this. Vermont. We have states across the country that are saying if you have 1 acre or more of land, the legislation is going through that you can have a private water well. That needs to be constructed properly by the licensed groundwater professional that is state licensed and smart at doing so. But we have options today to help this. There's USDA money for removing PFAS, point of entry systems, and point of entry systems for lead. Harness the groundwater wish that the NGWA is using. It's very simple. It's a system that allows those that can't afford to replace their private water well to get the funding they need. There is also the Water System Council funding. These are big tools that we need to be utilizing in our communities, and we're seeing great drillers and companies stepping up, but I want you to think about those. What did we see in the courts this year? We saw Waters of the United States turned on its ear, and it's still a big discussion. And we're 50-50 because we want property rights, but we also want to protect the waters of the United States. The Supreme Court was split 5-4. It's a big deal. Go back, look at that. The same with the Supreme Court was split again on Navajo Nation versus the United States and the state of Arizona, and what the allotment of water was allowed to them. At the same time, 3 months later, we saw Arizona, California, and Nevada come out with their reduction of almost 3.5 million acre feet of water. The upper basin Colorado River states, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. Thank you for having your due diligence. Let's pay attention to what happens with Nebraska and Colorado. There's plenty of water compacts up for argument right now, and we're seeing the highest court in the nation becoming very good at water law. And let's see what happens in 2024. Finally, geothermal. I cannot express enough to you industry right now how important it is to jump into ground source geothermal loop drilling. There's some great talks that are going to come out from IGSPA. There was great discussions within the National Groundwater Association. Here's the deal. You have the opportunity to be as active as you want. Go get your certified loop installer. Go to IGSPA and get your IGSPA certification and think about it. You can show up and just drill boreholes and toss some loops in and grout, or you can be doing the entire outside dirt work package and turning this into a diversified business. Remember, there's only 23 million private water wells out there, and we're dang busy. But as we expand the business, it's a great way to get more rigs out there and train drillers. Because if we're drilling 4 or 5 or 6 holes in a residential, or up to these commercial projects that can be 50, 100, 500, 1,000 holes, that muscle memory in geologic conditions that are similar is a pretty big deal. And so as we end this year, I want you to think about this. The state of New York is still talking about 100 million bore feet to be drilled. Massachusetts has 80 plus million bore feet. The city of Chicago, I sat on a call that said they could have 25 miles of loop installed for the next 30 years, 25 miles a year for 30 years, and just barely make their 2050 goals. And obviously, we're seeing what's happening with COP28 right now. I'm in Michigan. It's December. This is my backyard. This is my favorite time of the year. And there's no snow and there's sunshine, and it's 45 degrees outside right now. We got some stuff going on that we, as drillers, can be part of, from extracting resources for rare earth minerals to drilling water wells to installing ground source geothermal loops. The opportunity is yours, and 2024 looks to be a stellar year. Thank you for joining us for episode 90 of the Driller Newscast. We are off. Next week is Christmas Day. The following week is New Year's Day. I can't help but say thank you to this awesome industry. Everybody who's listening to the newscast, who's contributing to the newscast, who's contributing to the driller and our industry, to Team Driller for all of the hard work that's gone in to get us to episode 90 and put out all the rest of the great content that we're doing every day. Huge thank you to everybody who advertised and supported the newscast. Big thank you to TDH for as many times as you sponsored the newscast this year. You had no idea what the content was going to be when you signed up. You had no influence on it, but you still supported it because we were bringing credible, relevant news just a couple days from filming to your podcast or to your video. And that's a big deal. Okay, we've got a few weeks left of the year. It is going to get cold. It's going to get icy. We're going to be distracted by all of the holiday cheer that we have. Be safe. Make sure we have enough gloves. Make sure we're looking at our slips, trips, and falls. All the holiday travel that we have. People that are lost. Let's end this year safe, productive, smart. Hit 2024 running hard. Thank you again, Team Driller. Thank you, everybody that has participated and listened to the newscast this year. Happy holidays.